righty, everybody. I am so excited. Levy, thank you so much for being on Hey Docs with us today.
Absolutely, Jill. It's great to connect with you again.
Yes. So I have been counting down the days till we got to do this show because you are such a resource to me and my clients out there. And I cannot wait to get your wealth of knowledge out there to everybody who may be listening.
I appreciate that. Ditto. You've helped so many of my clients over the years. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So, what I would love if we start off is would you mind just telling us a little bit about yourself, how you got into the space, your practice, and then we'll just jump right into it.
Yeah, my name is Levi. I'm an attorney here in Los Angeles, and I represent entrepreneurial doctors in their transactions to successfully transition them in different stages of their practice with
Mhm.
confidence. I've been a dental attorney for I would 2010, so going on almost 14 years now
Wow.
in the industry. And I work with all sorts of doctors on startups, acquisitions, sales. I got three little boys, 9, 7, about to turn 4. And
Oh, you're
so, when
busy.
I'm not working, my time is usually occupied with them.
That's great. So, let's jump right into it. As I would say, we do most of our work together through the startup component,
Yes.
but I do.
Most orthos do.
Yes, yes. And so what I would love to do is and why I wanted you on the show is I feel like there's a lot that we go through when we are looking at lease negotiations or we're looking at contracts. And I feel like with a lot of our startup docs that are listening, they're either going to do an acquisition where they're going to be purchasing a practice or they're going to do a startup and going through some type of a lease negotiation. And what I would love to get from you, and what I hope that we'll be able to get to some of our listeners today, is just some of those, I don't know, uh, items that they should be aware of and concerned about when they're looking at their leases or when and we probably want to break this up a little bit. Let's maybe start with leases and startups and just what they should be looking at when they are getting into lease negotiations to be aware of.
Uh, besides not driving heavy machinery when we're reading the lease or just right after the specifics. Listen, most of our clients, most specialists do startups.
Mm.
And that's because there's not a lot of specialty practice out there for sale. And so
Yeah.
if you're going to wait around as a young doctor, young orthodontist, looking to buy a practice, you're going to be waiting around for a long time and you want to get your life started. So startups is, generally the way to go for most doctors. It's a very daunting
Hmm.
task to think about starting a new practice from scratch and putting aside all of the kind of business systems and everything you got to do in terms of financing and business planning. The main legal component of a startup is your lease.
Hmm.
And so, what I tell all my doctors is that you think of the lease as the keys to your house, right? You can't house a practice without a space, and most young doctors aren't going to go buy buildings. So
Hmm.
you are going to be in a relationship with the landlord for the extended time that you own your practice.
Hmm.
And that relationship is governed, that marriage contract is governed by that lease agreement.
Hmm.
And the few things that I really focus on when I'm working with a client is one, understand that lease is there to protect the landlord. It's
Yes.
there to
Yes.
protect the landlord's asset, the building. It's not there to protect the tenant. It's important to keep that in mind because you want to have perspective in terms of what you're able to do within the lease. If you try to turn this lease inside out and make it tenant friendly, you're going to be waiting around for a very long time. So that gives us focus. So what should we be focused on as a doctor looking to start a practice? I always tell doctors, think about the end game. Keep the end game in mind, right? So
Hmm.
what that means is you're going to be spending years building up a practice, building up equity, building up a patient base and a brand. And at some point, you're going to have to exit that practice, either retirement or bring on an associate. And so the only way to realize all the equity that you built up is through that sale.
Hmm.
And that's when the lease becomes very important. because
Mhm.
you cannot sell your practice without transferring that lease to your buyer, to your prospective tenant. And so what we're focused on when we're looking at leases, are there any provisions in the lease that are going to hamper us at that time where we want to sell the practice, or as we progress and as we build out the practice? Are there anything in there that's going to hamper us? And that's where our main goal is to mitigate as much risk so that we can protect that investment that you're building up.
Sure. And I love what you said. And I just want to make that point again, because I think so many times especially our younger docs who've never been through maybe a lease negotiation before, um, really don't realize that this is not set up for their best interest.
Absolutely.
And sometimes it's even hard to believe, but oh, the landlord seems so nice and the broker seems so nice, and how could
Yes.
they
Yes.
possibly want
Yeah.
to have these really awful little clauses in this, buried in this 55-page lease?
Yeah.
And so I appreciate you saying that. And I'm wondering, I've seen these leases for 17 plus years now. You've been doing this for a long time now as well. And I'm wondering if you had like maybe some of your top, like maybe 3 areas where you'd be like, docs, if you've got to pay attention to these areas, or make sure, because I've even seen where I've had docs that have been like, I've got a friend that's an attorney and they read through it and it looked good. Or I've got a friend, family member, and they've seen a lot of leases and they told me this is fine. There's nothing I need to worry about here.
Yeah.
Would you be able to give any suggestions or tips on maybe your like top no-goes that you want to be really careful about in a lease
Yeah,
maybe?
yeah, absolutely. And one of the big ones is, does the lease have a relocation clause? This
Mm.
is a clause that the landlord puts in the lease that allows the landlord unilaterally, without your consent, to move you to another space in the building or that shopping center. And that can be critical depending on how that clause is written. Not only is it disruptive to the practice, but if the relocation clause put any onus on you for the build out, that's money that you didn't realize you're going to have to spend later. If you really were looking at that shopping center because of the foot traffic or where you're located at an end cap or visually in the center or in the building because of your views, you don't want to be relocated to space on the other side of the building where there's not much foot traffic.
Yes.
And even more importantly, even if that relocation clause gives you sufficient time, right? So sufficient notice, it requires the landlord to completely do the build out so that you're not out of pocket for anything. You want to make sure that the space that you potentially have to move into is equals in size and footprint, right? So if you worked hard for 5 to 10 years and you built a great practice and you have 5, 6 patient bays, 10 patient bays, and
Mm-hmm.
you are booked up and you're seeing a lot of patients, if all of a sudden you're now reducing that to 20%, right? You're going from 2,000 to 1,800 or 1,600 square feet. That's a loss in potential revenue because you can't put patients in chairs. So, those are the kind of nuances in a lease that you have to make sure you're really concerned about and worried about, working with an attorney or a team that knows these kind of provisions and that can help you out.
Yeah. What do you think about guarantor provisions that are in there? Do you think there's any case to be concerned about? I've seen some questionable ones before.
Yeah, a guarantor, just to briefly explain this, you want to make sure all your business contracts, including the lease, are in the name of your corporation, or if you're not in California, PLLC maybe. And so all your business contracts are lined up with your business. So
Mm-hmm.
you're not personally on there. And this is rule number one for personal protection. But what you will find, especially if you're in very hot zones like Southern California, places like Colorado, or developing in Texas, landlords inevitably will require the dentist to personally guarantee the lease obligations.
Yes.
And what that means is that they can come after you personally or your personal assets if there's a default on the lease. I'm a little contrarian on this point. A lot of people will scare dentists to say you cannot sign a guarantee
Hmm.
or you really have to be careful of guarantees. The fact of the matter is you're not going to be able to sign a lease in 95% of the cases unless you sign that guarantee. And so if your dream is to build a practice, you're going to have to sign a guarantee. The good news is that, when you go to Bank of America or provide or someone to give you financing for a startup and they give you $600,000, $500,000 with no collateral, right?
Hmm.
The reason is the success rate for these loans are almost 100%. And so you may be scared about all the liability you're taking on, but you're such a great bet as a doctor, as an orthodontist on a startup, that the banks are willing to give you 100% financing.
Hmm.
And so
Hmm.
that should ease your mind when it comes to these guarantees. But if you want to look at the nitty gritty, what we try to do with guarantees is limit them. If you've been there after 5 years, after 10 years, they fall off. Or when
Yes.
you sell your practice, you don't have to continue to
Hmm.
guarantee your assignee's lease after the sale. So these are
Yeah.
some of the things we request and we definitely try to work on as we work through a lease.
Yeah, that's great. So let's talk a little bit now about in that buying and selling a practice. I could have a doctor on here, even though I have a lot of startups that are on younger docs on this. You alluded to it in the beginning that even though we're starting a practice, we have to have our end game in place.
Mhm.
What are some things that you think docs really need to be paying attention to? I know you talked about a few of them, but if there's anything else that you think they really need to be thinking about, or if a doc is coming to you, and we've had multiple transitions where a doc is saying, "Hey, I'm ready to sell. And I am, for whatever that reason is, and I need to put together a package for the buying doc." Can you talk through what that process looks like from the selling side to also maybe
Yeah,
both sides of that?
yeah, absolutely. From a seller's perspective, we've built all this equity in the practice and we spent so much time working the practice. Now we're looking to settle down, retire. And so what you really want is peace of mind, right?
Hmm.
You want to be able to hand over your practice, transition it, provide that legacy to your buyer and realize the cash equity in your practice, but without all of the headache of potential liability and getting sued after the sale and all
Hmm.
that. Preparation is key. You have to have all your financial documents in order, 2 or 3 years of tax returns and profit loss statements. You have to have all of your key legal documents in order, including the lease and any amendments you signed and all that. And then you have to have all your systems in order in the practice so someone can easily produce records and review stuff. And so
Hmm.
if you have all that preparation ready, your transition is just going to go a lot smoother. Besides preparation, you want to really minimize the potential risk after the sale. And the way we do that is every buyer who's going to come to your practice is going to do due diligence. What that means is they're going to look at your records, look at your financials, and look at everything and make sure but what becomes key is what are you representing to that buyer when you sign that sales contract? There's a whole section in a sales agreement where the seller's representing facts about the practice. They don't have lawsuits, they complied with OSHA, they don't have any claims from employees, they paid their employees all the right way, classified them. And what a lot of sellers make mistakes in doing is that they don't hire an attorney to manage what facts and representations are being made to the buyer. They rely on a broker's contract or they rely on a friend's
Yes.
contract. And so they're literally signing off on representations where they don't know, they haven't reviewed them with someone. And what happens is if those facts don't match up, if the buyer finds out that you've misrepresented something, they can come back and sue you.
Mm.
And so we want to minimize that potential by working with the seller actively to make sure that we're not saying something that is not truthful in that document.
Yes, that's great. To break it down just a little bit further, somebody who is selling their practice would still be working with a broker potentially, but they are adding on the attorney component of it, just to make sure that they are, and there's a little CYA there, right?
Yeah,
You know?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, the broker's going to package the practice, value the practice, and match make the parties. And it's the attorney's job is to minimize any liabilities for the seller post closing by reviewing these documents and making sure they're adequate for the transaction.
Yeah. And then I'm going to, I'm sorry, I'm making this very, very elementary here, but I think
No, no,
a lot of our listeners just don't completely understand this process. More than likely, a buyer is going to be coming in, and even though they're probably going to have a broker too, they will have a lawyer on their side as well, more than likely.
absolutely,
And
absolutely.
and so I think it for listeners out there, a lot of times what this goes to is very similar to when we have a startup. If you remember way back when you were purchasing or going through your lease negotiations, where it's your side and the leasing agent side or the landlord side, very similar when we're doing a purchase. And correct me if I'm wrong here, but that's the way I've seen it: is both parties come to the table. The contract goes back and forth on that selling side between the two attorneys. You guys, the brokers determine the points, attorneys determine the legal ease of it all, and make sure that
Yeah,
everybody
yeah,
is good on
absolutely. And
that.
from a buyer's side, your attorney's protecting you by trying to flesh out any issues in the practice by
Mm-hmm.
asking the seller to make whole sorts of representations and then protecting you on the back end, making sure the seller's not competing, stealing your patients away, stealing your employees away, and protecting that investment that you just made.
Yeah, that's great. So as we're down this little path a little bit, any red flags or items that you think we need to be paying attention to? You're doing a great job at just really laying this out, but I think these are all the things that I don't think anybody learns really, and you're just trusting who you're listening to out there a lot of times.
I've done this for over 14 years now. I've done 700 practice transitions, I think
Wow.
300 startups, and I've learned that I've become more of a psychologist and therapist more than anything else, more than an attorney. And the biggest kind of red flags or hurdles I see in my clients who are in the acquisitions or even on the sales side has nothing to do with the legal stuff. And it's
Mm.
all about mindset. It's
Hmm.
all about, are you in the right frame of mind and place to go through this process? If
Oh,
you're a
good.
seller, are you ready to let go?
Hmm.
It's a big issue for a lot of sellers. If you're a seller selling to private equity, are you ready for the grind and audits they're going to do on your practice?
Hmm.
If you're a buyer, are you doing this for the right reasons? Are you so anxious and fearful that you're going to trip yourself up and not be able to be successful? Or
Yes.
are you really in the mindset to be goal oriented and achieve? So I think mindset plays a big part of this. For young doctors, I think another issue is understanding timing of these deals, right? When you want to start up a practice, 2 or 3 months to find a location, maybe a couple months to negotiate the deal terms and the lease, and then 6 months of build out. You're already a year out from where you are
Yep.
today by the time you open. And then by the
Hmm.
time that practice is up and running, you know this, Jill, you're not going to be 5 days a week from the get go.
Oh,
So
no.
that's another 6 months to a year and a
Yep.
half. And so what becomes critical for young doctors is if you are in a situation, and this is all about strategy, if you're in a situation in a job that you hate, that you're like, I gotta get out of here, you're really losing all your leverage in any sort of negotiations because you're so desperate. And then reflect on the timing as well. Be in a healthy place. If that means changing associate jobs first to be in a
Yes.
comfortable situation so you're not doing things out of desperation, and then planning ahead. You might not want to own and operate a practice right now, but given the amount of time and it takes to build one out, you should at least start doing your homework, talking to people and consultants and attorneys to get an understanding of what you need to get started.
Yeah, that's great. Oh, such good advice. And I completely agree with you. I always tell my docs, I'm like, from the time we start, like actually doing demographics to our doors open, we're easily 6 to 12 months in,
Oh
easily.
yeah, easy.
And then, like you said, from the time you're making money, I always say, don't plan on making any money for the
Yeah,
first couple of years.
Yeah,
You will get there, but it takes time.
you'll have to carry your associate job,
Yes.
and that's another thing. Where are you opening up? Is it close to your location? Is your boss going to fire you as soon as they find out that you opened up
Mhm.
in their neighborhood? Or are you far enough where you can keep that job?
Yeah.
These are all kind of logistical things you got to think about as you go
Yeah.
through this journey.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So I'm curious to pick your brain a little bit on anything coming into our market or changes in what we've seen in the past from leases and negotiations to maybe what's coming in the future that we need to be aware of or thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, we've had 2020 to 2023 have been the craziest 3 years that I've been doing this. I came in after
Right?
the Great Recession in
Yes.
2009, so that was a really tumultuous time. But these 3 years, especially for startups, this is a slide that I always talk about in my lectures when I'm in front of audiences, is that we thought the world was going to end in 2023 for the dental industry, all specialties included. And for me, all my transactions stopped. So it was a
Mm-hmm.
bit scary. But what I've seen come out of it is that we are so strong as an industry. All my startups, for the most part, they survived. They're
Yep.
flourishing now. They're doing
Yes.
great. All that pent up demand is back into the market. So the patients are there. So that should, one, everyone should have confidence given what the industry as a whole has gone through in the last 3 years, that you can, if you made it through this, you can make it through anything. Two, where everything was slowed down in the last few years on startups, I think the trend is now that we're totally back to normal. And so the normal timelines on doing a startup apply in 2023 and
Mm-hmm.
2024.
Mm-hmm.
And then a lot of young doctors are very skittish about the interest rates and how things are moving in terms of financing and interest
Yes.
rates. And I'll tell you, in the dental industry, the interest rates are a tick lower than in other industries. And again, the reason is doctors are such a good bet in terms of financing from banks that they can keep their rates relatively low because the risk is so low for the banks.
Mm-hmm.
And that should give you every indication that if the banks are willing to make that bet on you, you should have the confidence to make the bet on yourself and get out there and follow
Yes.
whatever goals you have.
Yeah, that is such, again, good advice, and I love that. You bet on yourself. If you're gonna wade into this, you put the right people in place, make sure you're covering yourself. The
That's
chances
right.
that you're going
That's
to
right.
fail are going to be so small.
That's right. I mean, and on the interest rate thing, like when I started, I remember docs having loans of 8, 9,
Yeah.
10%. I mean,
Yes.
we're in an inflationary period right now, but our doctor loans are still
Lower
at
than they
5 or 6 or seven
Yep.
percent, which is historically speaking very much average, and it's only going to probably go down. So I think we're headed for some nice strong growth.
Yeah, good. I love to hear that. That's exactly what I see too when I look at the future as well. And like you said, I can remember when interest rates have been crazy high and you just refi. You get to a
Yes.
point, you get in a stronger position, refi around, and you always sometimes you need that business write off anyways. So there's pros and cons out there all the time. So I'm curious if a doc were they're listening and they're like, oh, this is such good advice, and but I'm curious to know what should I be looking for in an attorney when I am looking for somebody to represent myself? Can you give us some guidance there? Because as we know, not all attorneys are created equal and each have different specialties and whatnot. Can you give us some guidance in that direction?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say focus on an attorney who works in your industry and has other potential colleagues of yours have vouched for them, have worked.
Mm-hmm.
So you want
Mm-hmm.
referrals from your colleagues and the consultants that you're working with because they have seen their work through the deals that they've worked on.
Yes.
If they're industry specific, like in the dental industry, they'll know the nuances of those contracts and be able to help you that much more. And also, they'll be able to put you open doors to other people that you might need to speak with.
Mm-hmm.
banks, consultants, CPAs. And so that's a benefit of working with someone in a niche, like a dental attorney. And then I really implore all my clients, even potential clients who call me, I hope they're talking to two or three people, two or three attorneys, because you get a sense of who you want to work with by talking to them. And also, it's a very costly endeavor to work with a specialist, to work with someone. And so you have to understand and learn about the market. And so you can't do that unless you talk to two or three people, see how they present their fees, see how they present their philosophy, their skill set, how many deals have they worked on. And then you'll be able to pick the person who you want to work with.
Yeah, yeah. And I get asked this a lot, and I don't want you to necessarily speak to this personally. I have some docs to be like, Jill, should I pay by the hour or should I pay by a bulk rate? What's better? And I don't know that there is a right or a wrong answer, but do you have any insight or can you talk to that without,
Yeah,
I'm not
absolutely.
trying to put you on the spot at
No, no,
all,
no. I love
but
this question. I love this question because this is a fantastic reason why working with a specialist is great, right? So
hmm hmm
most of my deals are project-based fees or flat fees, not by the hour.
hmm
And the reason that I can successfully do that, or other people who are specialized can successfully do that, is that we work on so many of these deals for just one type of client that we're able to gauge how many hours it'll take and what a reasonable
hmm
fee is and commoditize basically the service. And my clients love it because they know exactly what they're paying for. And so they don't have to worry every time they get on the phone with me that they're going to have to
yeah.
rush off or speak, 10 times faster, or,
Yes.
I'm going to bill them for every email or minute. And so there's a lot of peace of mind there. Trust me, I hate hourly rates. Sometimes we have to do it because of the nature of the transaction.
hmm
It's very complex, but I work on a flat fee basis, and a lot of attorneys in this industry have done that and
hmm
followed suit because we only work on certain type of deals. I work on leases throughout the year, day in, day out, month in and month, but I don't do leases for car washes or coffee shops. It's only
hmm
healthcare, dental leases. So I'm able to gauge how long it'll take me on the deal
Yeah.
and keep it
Yeah.
flat rate.
Thank you for answering that question because I get it a lot. And I know it's like one of those touchy feely questions a little bit, but I think doctors who are listening will really appreciate that because it is a question that comes up all the time. So if we finish up here and we've really dived in and you've been great at answering just some good fundamental questions, anything that you feel like we have not covered that you're like, oh, if I could speak to a younger doctor or speak to a selling doctor or an existing, here's one more point or two more points that I really think they need to hear.
We've covered a lot, but I would just reiterate how much mindset matters in your deal. And
Hmm
you have to have laser focus. People will tell you you're crazy. There'll be naysayers in your family. You have all the student loan debt. Why are you taking on this debt? But you have to really understand what is it that you want.
hmm
Understand your goals, because if you can't express your goals to your attorney and your consultant, they're not going to be able to help you the way that they can once they understand what you want. And then also, fear is a very strong human emotion. And the deals that I've seen fail, I always say this, is usually it's because of fear, because something is going on within the client outside the transaction, and it's just stopping them from moving forward. The more you can do, the doctor is the critical part of the practice. You're
hmm
like the sun around all these planets, your employees and patients. And so the better you can work on yourself, make your mindset, the more successful you'll be. And
Yes.
the last thing I would say is there's a lot of doctors who want to do everything themselves. And so my most successful clients, and what I've learned, which has been very difficult for me, is knowing what you don't know and knowing how to ask for help.
Mm,
You don't
good
know it.
advice.
The most successful clients I've had that have 20, 30, 40 practices now freely admit to me what they don't know, and they
Hmm
easily delegate it. And
hmm
so the best thing you can learn as a young doctor is how to spot your blind spots and freely delegate it to people who can take up those tasks.
Yeah, great advice. That's wonderful to leave us on for sure. And you could not be more correct in that. And that is hard. It's hard for all of us as business
It's very
owners
difficult.
to be able to, I love what you said, spot those blind spots. And sometimes our pride can get in the way, like, geez, I'm a doctor, or I'm a this, or I'm a that, and I should know everything. And
Yeah.
no, here's the deal. You shouldn't know everything. Probably part of maturing is just in our business road and life is accepting that there are lots of really great people and smart people that we can put around us to help us be even more
Awesome.
even more successful. So if somebody wants to get a hold of you, would you talk to, I know probably some of the listeners are like, oh geez, he's only out of California, so does that mean he will work with me if I'm in Illinois or Colorado or whatnot? So would you mind talking to how somebody could get a hold of you if they've got
Yep.
questions,
Yep.
maybe what scope of work you would
Yep.
be working on, and then if you work in other states or not?
Yeah, absolutely. You can look up my law firm. It's Pacific Health Law Group. If you look it up, you'll find our website. I have all information. We have a calendar link where you can schedule a call with us whenever you like. We're primarily based in California. Most of my work is done in California, but I have associates and other attorneys in other states that I work in. So it would have to be case by case to see if we can help you out in your state. And the easiest way is just to set up a call via the link. I do free initial consults where I talk to clients. I don't charge them. We could talk about what you're looking to do and if we can help.
Wonderful. All right, Levi, thank you so much for being on Hey Docs. And the way I like to finish up Hey Docs is with a little speed round. Are you up for the challenge?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, describe your style in one word.
I would say thoughtful.
Ooh, I like that. All right, what are you listening to or watching?
I am watching The Diplomat on Netflix.
Oh,
My wife just started out with Kerry Russell, and I listen to a lot of stuff. I listen to a lot of stuff. Right now, I got a kick on this guy, Matt Duncan. I think he's in North Carolina. He's got some really good music out there. So I've been
ah,
listening to stuff
cool.
in the office. Yeah.
Ah, that's great. That's great. What do you do just for you?
I got 3 little kids, so there's not much of just for me around this house. I got a busy practice I like to work out. When I can get out 3 or 4 days a week at the gym and just not be at work, not be with the kids. That's my little sanctuary.
Love it. Love it. Any hidden talents you'd want to share with us?
I'm a mean parallel parker. I'm a mean parallel parker. I also have a really good knack. I have a really good knack of spotting. I've been married for 12 years now with my wife. I have a really good knack of when we're out at restaurants, calling what date a couple might be on, sitting next
Oh,
to
I
on
love
first date.
it.
Yeah,
Oh, that's got to be a fun dinner conversation you two
yeah,
can
it's
have.
always fun.
And then if you had
We try to guess how far down the relationship they are when we're at a restaurant.
I always love the couples that you see that don't say a single word to each other and stare at their phones the whole time. And you're like,
Oh
ooh,
yeah, they've been together for 20, 30 years
yeah,
maybe.
exactly. What's a big, hairy, audacious goal if you have one that you'd want to share?
I'm really in a growth mindset, so I want to double my practice in the next 3 years and
Wonderful.
10x it in the next 10 years. It's just hairy, like you said, hairy, audacious goal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But my goal is really to have a great team. I just want to enter that next phase where I'm mentoring and growing the practice and have a great team around me so that I can watch them succeed too.
Yeah, that's great. Again, thank you so much for being on Hey Docs. This was wonderful information. I have been anxiously awaiting to do this show with you because this is exactly what all my younger docs are looking for and existing as well. And you are definitely one of my go-to guys out there. So thank you so much for being on Hey Docs today with me.
Jill, it's an absolute pleasure. And I'll just say, happy to embarrass you. You're such a good consultant to work with. My clients have been so pleased to have you on their side. And It's really the hardest part of the job, because when you're starting a practice, just reviewing the lease, while it's very important, is such a sliver of
Mm.
all the 360 degree systems that you have to put in place to be successful. You're doing good work, and we
Thank
really
you.
appreciate that.
Well, thank you so much. All right. Well, until next time.
Bye, Jill.
Okay, we did it. Thank